The moment my boots sank into the sand, I knew the island didn't want me here. The air was too still, as if even the wind had decided this strip of jungle and rock was forbidden. Salt clung to the back of my throat, heavy and metallic, though the ocean lapped quietly against the shore. I shifted my pack on my shoulders, forcing myself forward, but every instinct screamed at me to turn back to the boat bobbing in the surf. There were no seabirds, not one. Back on the transport, I'd grown used to the endless screeches overhead, the constant caw of gulls fighting over scraps. Here, the sky stretched blue and empty, silent as a grave. A petty officer helped me drag the last of the crates onto shore. He didn't speak. None of them did. Their faces were drawn tight, eyes darting as if expecting something to emerge from the tree line. When I asked where the rest of the garrison was, nobody answered. Finally, the officer muttered, "You'll see soon enough," and stalked off. The jungle pressed close behind the beach, a wall of twisted green. The trees leaned over one another as though conspiring. Thick vines dangled like nooses, and the smell, God, the smell, was a cloying mixture of wet earth, mildew, and something faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. I could hear nothing inside it, no chirp, no buzz, just my own ragged breathing. The outpost was a cluster of prefab metal huts corroding from the salt air. Rust ate the edges, and streaks of red ran like dried blood down their sides. A comms antenna jutted upward at a precarious angle, its base wrapped in tape and rope. Not exactly the cutting edge of naval might. Inside the main hut, I met the station chief, Lieutenant Harris. He looked more prisoner than officer, his uniform wrinkled, beard several weeks grown. His handshake was limp, eyes bloodshot and hollow. "You're the comms tech?" he asked, voice raspy, like he hadn't spoken in days. "Yeah," I said. "Orders were to reinforce the signal relay. They told me you've been having interference," he cut in, rubbing his temples. "It's not the equipment. You'll see. They always see." I didn't like how he said that. They always see, as though others before me had come and gone, swallowed by the silence of this place. That first night, as I lay on the cot in my hut, the unease deepened. The sheets smelled of mildew. Something ticked in the walls. Water droplets or insects, I couldn't tell. Through the thin paneling, I heard footsteps pacing outside, crunching in the gravel. Too heavy to be one man, too erratic to be a patrol. When I peeked out, rifle in hand, the yard was empty. Above me, the stars were unnaturally bright, the Milky Way a smear of bone-white light across the black. The sea whispered against the shore, yet even that sound seemed distant, muffled like hearing through cotton. And then came the voice, carried on the wind just beyond the tree line. A whisper, low and deliberate. My name. I froze, pulse hammering, eyes locked on the jungle. No one else stirred. No alarm was raised. It was just me standing in the dark, staring at a wall of leaves that seemed to breathe. That was when I realized something important, something I should have acknowledged the moment I arrived. This island was alive, and it was listening. The next morning, I found the crew gathered outside the mess hut, faces drawn in a way that told me sleep hadn't come easy for them either. They avoided my eyes, speaking in low murmurs, conversations that stopped the moment I stepped closer. I'd been on plenty of remote assignments before, but the atmosphere here was different, thicker, suffocating, as though every word might be overheard by something that wasn't human. Lieutenant Harris sat alone at the edge of the group, stirring his coffee without drinking it. His hands trembled slightly, though whether from caffeine, exhaustion, or fear, I couldn't tell. "You heard it, didn't you?" he asked without looking at me. I hesitated. Heard what? He smiled faintly, lips cracked. "The jungle. It doesn't take long. Some people hear laughter, some hear crying. Sometimes it knows your name." I said nothing, but the unease in my gut deepened. Later, while repairing a loose connection in the comms shack, I tried to shake the memory of that whisper. The equipment wasn't beyond saving, but static bled through every channel. Voices flickered inside the distortion, half words, syllables that rose and fell with uncanny rhythm. I yanked off the headset, throat dry. It couldn't be voices. It had to be feedback, a trick of the frequency. By noon, the sun burned high overhead, but even then the island seemed oddly muted. No gulls circled the shore, no buzzing insects in the humid air. I stood outside the hut, listening hard. All I could hear was the faint rush of the waves, and behind it, a sound too soft to be real, a chorus of whispers threading through the trees. One of the younger privates, a gaunt kid named Mallory, noticed me staring at the jungle. "Don't listen," he muttered. "That's how it starts. Once you listen, it's inside you." He didn't wait for my reply, just walked off, muttering prayers under his breath. Get the wind picked up, rattling the thin walls of my hut. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the gusts sweep across the compound. But the longer I listened, the less it sounded like wind. There were pauses, intonations, words stretched thin, like voices carried across a long tunnel. I got up, wrapped my jacket tight, and stepped outside. The yard was deserted. The generator hummed faintly, a weak glow spilling from the mess hut. The jungle swayed at the edge of the compound, black shapes shifting in the shadows. And then I heard it clearly, my name again. Drawn out, almost playful. My skin prickled cold. I followed the sound to the tree line, rifle clutched tight. The wind hissed through the leaves, carrying that whisper in looping fragments. "Come closer. Come closer." For a moment I thought I saw someone standing between the trunks, a figure, pale and narrow, retreating deeper into the dark. I took one step forward before Harris's voice cut through the night. "Stop!" I froze. He appeared from the shadows, face lined with fury and fear. "Never follow it into the trees," he hissed. "Never!" The wind died suddenly, as if the jungle itself had been holding its breath. Harris's eyes searched mine, hollow and haunted. "You think you're stationed here to fix radios? No, you're here because they sent another body to feed the island." My mouth went dry. "What the hell are you talking about?" He didn't answer. He just walked back toward the huts, shoulders hunched, leaving me staring at the dark wall of jungle where the whispers had already started again. The next morning, I decided to push deeper inland. My official duty was the comms relay, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing curiosity or the fear that the island was cultivating in me. If the whispers came from the jungle, I needed to see what was inside it. I told Harris where I was going. He just shook his head. "Don't wander too far. The trees don't give you back." His words hung heavy as I stepped off the beaten path and into the undergrowth. The jungle swallowed me almost immediately. The heat pressed down like a wet blanket, humidity clinging to my skin until every breath tasted of soil and rot. The smell was overwhelming. Decay sweetened with something sharp, like copper. My boots sank into loam that squelched as if I were treading across old flesh. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to find someone following me, but the path behind had already vanished. Vines twisted together, thick and muscular, knotting the air with a lattice of green. It felt deliberate, as though the forest was knitting itself closed behind me. Then I heard it, a soft crunch, a footstep that wasn't mine. I froze, rifle raised, the undergrowth stilled. For a long, breathless moment, the only sound was my pulse hammering in my ears. Then a branch snapped, close. Too close. I spun, and for an instant I swore I saw eyes peering at me from between the trunks, not animal eyes. Human. Wide, luminous, unblinking. But when I blinked, they were gone. The deeper I went, the stronger the sense grew. I was being watched. Every rustle of leaf, every sway of vine seemed purposeful. The jungle wasn't just alive, it was aware. I stumbled onto a clearing, a circle of ground where the vegetation thinned unnaturally. The soil was dark, damp, and littered with bones. Animal, maybe human, gnawed clean and brittle with age. I crouched, lifting one. It crumbled to powder in my hand. A whisper bee rushed my ear. I jerked around, rifle raised again. Nothing but trees. Still, I felt breath against my skin, cold, though the air was stifling hot. Sweat poured down my back as I forced myself onward. I told myself it was paranoia, exhaustion, tricks of the light, but deep down I knew I wasn't alone. Something trailed me all the way back. I never caught a clear glimpse, only the fleeting impression of movement, a shadow darting between trunks, just out of sight. The jungle grew louder the further I went, leaves rustling without wind, branches groaning as though bending toward me. By the time I stumbled back into the compound, my nerves were frayed raw. Harris was waiting, arms crossed, expression grim. "You went too far," he said. I swallowed. Something was following me. His eyes flicked toward the tree line. It always does. I pressed. "What is it?" He didn't answer, only muttered, "Best not to know," and walked away. That night, as I tried to sleep, I felt the same eyes on me. Even inside the hut, behind metal walls, I could sense the jungle leaning close, listening to every breath I took. And I understood something I hadn't before. The jungle wasn't just watching. It was waiting. The crew gathered around the fire pit that night, the first time since my arrival that anyone seemed willing to share company. The air was thick with smoke from damp wood, but the fire itself was a meager flame, more shadow than warmth. Everyone sat close, their faces half lit, half buried in darkness. I could feel the tension among them, like prisoners clinging to ritual because it kept their sanity intact. Harris sat apart, staring into the flames as if they might swallow him. Mallory fidgeted with his rifle, muttering to himself. Another man, Corporal Ramirez, finally broke the silence. "You've heard it, haven't you?" he asked me. I didn't answer immediately. "The wind?" Ramirez gave a dry laugh. "That's what we call it. Wind. But it ain't wind." The others shifted uncomfortably. Harris closed his eyes but didn't interrupt. Ramirez leaned forward, eyes glinting. "Locals on the mainland, they don't come here. Won't even look at this island. They say it's cursed, built on old ground. Long before our maps, long before their people even had words for gods, something was buried here. Something that wasn't meant to wake." His words were like hooks. I wanted to scoff, but the jungle's silence pressed against my memory. Mallory spat into the dirt. "Don't tell him that crap, he doesn't need to know." Ramirez snapped back. "Better he knows now than ends up like the others." That silenced the group. The fire popped loudly, sparks rising like tiny stars. I asked carefully, "Others?" Ramirez's gaze shifted, uneasy. "We weren't the first detachment here. Last crew. They didn't make it. Vanished, one by one. Some we found torn apart, others just gone. Report says they got reassigned. Truth is, the island ate them." The way he said it, flat, certain, made the skin along my arms crawl. I glanced at Harris, hoping for denial, for some rational explanation, but his eyes steamed. Aid fixed on the fire. Finally, he muttered, "The island doesn't let go." No one spoke after that. The only sound was the crackle of the flames and the steady thrum of the surf beyond the huts. Yet underneath, softer, I thought I heard the faintest hum, like the jungle itself was chuckling at our fear. Later, lying in my cot, I couldn't shake Ramirez's words. Cursed ground, something buried. I tried to dismiss it as superstition, but I remembered the bones in the clearing, the eyes in the trees. Superstition had teeth here. Sleep came fitfully. Dreams twisted into feverish images, vines wrapping around my limbs, pulling me into black soil. A voice whispered beneath the surface, promising release if I'd only dig. I woke gasping, nails raking the thin mattress. My hands were streaked with dirt. Not just under the nails, caked into the skin as though I'd clawed at the ground myself. The whispers followed me even as I sat upright in the dark, faint, like breathing against my ear. Dig. I pressed my palms to my ears, rocking slightly, fighting to block it out, but the island didn't stop. It never stopped. When dawn came, I saw Harris already outside, staring at the tree line with sunken eyes. He didn't look at me when he spoke, but his words chilled me. They want you now. It always chooses someone new. And in that moment, I realized the worst truth of all. The stories weren't warnings. They were promises. It started with a scream, sharp, ragged, torn from the throat of a man who had seen something no one should. I bolted upright in my cot, heart hammering, the sound echoing through the compound. By the time I stumbled outside with rifle in hand, the crew was already gathered, faces pale in the thin light of dawn. "Who was it?" I demanded. No one answered. Harris stood in the center, fists clenched at his sides. His eyes darted toward the jungle, then back to us. Finally, Ramirez muttered, "Lewis." I scanned the group, one face missing. Private Lewis, quiet, broad-shouldered, the kind of soldier who melted into the background. He was gone. We fanned out, combing the yard, calling his name. My voice cracked with each shout, swallowed by the trees. No answer. Only silence, oppressive and deliberate. We followed the footprints into the jungle. The trail was erratic, Lewis stumbling as if dragged. Then the print simply stopped at a patch of churned earth. That's where we found the first scrap of fabric, his sleeve, torn and damp with something dark. Ramirez bent down, lifting it gingerly. The smell hit us at once, iron and rot, the scent of fresh blood already souring in the heat. Harris's jaw tightened. "We go back." Mallory's voice shook. "We can't just leave him." Harris didn't flinch. "He's gone." But I refused to move. Something in the soil caught my eye. I crouched and saw gouges ripped into the earth, deep furrows as though something had clawed its way upward from below, not dragged down, upward. My stomach churned. Something pulled him under. Ramirez paled, making the sign of the cross. Mallory cursed under his breath. Harris just turned, shoulders hunched. Back to the compound. Now. We obeyed, but unease trailed us like a shadow. By the time the sun set, the whispers had grown bolder. They rose and fell with the wind, weaving between the huts, slip, ping through the cracks in the walls. They called Lewis's name now, over and over, like the island was mocking us. That night no one slept. Mallory paced with his rifle, muttering prayers. Ramirez sat in silence, hands trembling. I lay on my cot, staring at the ceiling, fighting the urge to listen. Then, just past midnight, the scratching began. At first I thought it was rats beneath the floorboards, but the sound grew louder, more insistent, nails dragging across metal, something testing the walls. The others heard it too. I saw their eyes gleaming in the dark, wide and wet with fear. A sharp clang rang out, and Mallory shouted, firing a burst through the wall. Silence followed, thick and heavy. When we stepped outside, rifles ready, the yard was empty. No intruder, no blood, only a single shred of fabric pinned to the antenna by something sharp and blackened like a claw. It was Lewis's other sleeve. The crew stared at it in silence, the firelight flickering across their hollow faces. Harris finally spoke, voice flat. "This is just the beginning." I wanted to believe he was exaggerating, that we'd find a rational explanation in the morning. But deep down, I knew the truth. Lewis was gone, and whatever had taken him wasn't finished. Morning revealed the damage. I woke to the sound of Ramirez cursing outside, his voice sharp with panic. Pulling on my boots, I stepped out of the hut and froze. The supply crates stacked near the antenna were ruined. Thick gouges ran across the metal, deep enough to warp the steel. It wasn't just scratches. It was as if something had gripped the crates with claws the size of knives and tried to rip them open. "Tell me that's not an animal," Mallory muttered, face pale. I knelt, running my hand along one of the grooves. The steel curled inward, sharp enough to slice my palm. Whatever did this had strength no animal on earth should possess. Ramirez whispered, "It marked us." Harris appeared last, looking more ragged than ever. His beard had grown wild, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't ask questions. He just stared at the claw marks, lips pressed tight, and finally said, "Secure the antenna. That's all that matters now." But the antenna was failing too. Static drowned every attempt to call the mainland. I spent hours at the console tuning frequencies, resoldering connections, yet the interference wasn't mechanical. It pulsed, rhythmic, almost alive. Through the static, I sometimes caught fragments of voices, screams, sobs, and words I couldn't translate. At one point, a sound jolted me upright. "Help!" A voice, faint but clear, broke through the channel. I froze. It was Lewis. "Lewis?" I whispered into the mic. "Where are you? Can you hear me?" The line hissed, then his voice again, warped, stretched too thin. "It's inside. Help me." Then a shriek, so loud I ripped the headset off. The static surged until the console sparked. I sat trembling, chest tight, the echo of Lewis's cry still ringing in my skull. When I told Harris, he only shook his head. "It's not him anymore. Don't listen." But how could I ignore it? If there was even a chance Lewis was alive. At night, the compound grew restless. Every few minutes came another noise, tapping at the walls, footsteps crunching gravel where no one stood. Mallory swore he saw a figure crouched near the generator, but when we searched, nothing was there. The worst came just before dawn. A metallic screech ripped through the compound, like steel tearing apart. We ran outside to find the antenna bent at a grotesque angle. Its base was scored with more claw marks, black residue staining the edges like burnt tar. Ramirez fell to his knees. "We're cut off. We're already dead." Harris didn't argue. He just stared into the jungle, jaw tight. I couldn't sleep after that. I sat outside my hut, rifle across my knees, eyes locked on the tree line. The jungle seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Branches swaying through the air was still. Somewhere out there, Lewis, or what was left of him, was calling. Somewhere out there, the thing that had strength enough to shred steel was waiting. And I realized with bone-deep certainty, whatever stalked us didn't want to kill us quickly. It wanted to break us first. The tide had gone out when Ramirez found the entrance. He came running into the compound, panting, sweat darkening his collar. "Caves!" he gasped. "Down by the south shore. You need to see this." Harris immediately shook his head. "We stay clear of the coast. Nothing good comes from what the sea hides." But curiosity gnawed at me, stronger than fear. After the antenna's destruction, after Lewis's voice on the radio, I needed answers. "Show me," I told Ramirez. Harris didn't stop us. He just muttered, "Don't go too deep." The southern shore was a jagged stretch of rock, slick with seaweed. The air stank of salt and rot, thick with the reek of dead fish washed up in clusters. Ramirez led me down a narrow path carved into the stone until the mouth of the cave yawned before us, black, damp, and impossibly wide. The entrance was ringed with carvings, symbols gouged deep into the rock, some spiraled, others jagged. They weren't military, weren't anything modern. They looked ancient, older than the language of the locals, etched by hands long gone. "Tell me those don't look fresh," Ramirez whispered. I leaned closer. The grooves were clean, edges sharp as though carved days ago, not centuries. My skin prickled. We lit our flashlights and stepped inside. The cave swallowed the light almost greedily. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, echoing through the chamber. The walls glistened, slick with algae, and the air carried a stench of wet stone mingled with something fouler, sweet, putrid like old decay. Then we saw the bones, piles of them stacked against the walls. Some were animal, brittle and yellow. Others were human. Jawbones, ribs, finger bones, all arranged in patterns. Circles, spirals, lines leading deeper into the dark. My stomach lurched. "This is a grave." Ramirez's voice trembled. "No, it's an altar." At the far end of the chamber stood a stone. A slab, worn smooth with age. Symbols covered it, identical to those at the entrance. But this slab was different. Its surface was stained dark, as if countless offerings had been poured upon it. I reached out without thinking, brushing the stone with my fingertips. It was warm. Ramirez yanked me back, eyes wide. "Don't touch it!" Before I could reply, a sound rose from deeper inside the cave. A low hum, vibrating through the stone, carrying on the damp air. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't natural. It was alive. The light from my flashlight flickered. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the walls. For a moment, I thought I saw shapes moving in the dark. Limbs too thin, faces melting and reforming, bodies that weren't whole. Ramirez grabbed my arm. "We need to leave. Now." We stumbled back toward the entrance, boots slipping on the slick stone. The hum grew louder, chasing us, rising in pitch until it echoed like a scream through the cavern. When we burst out onto the shore, gasping, the tide had already begun to rise. The cave mouth filled with rushing water, sealing whatever was inside back beneath the sea. Back at the compound, Harris looked at us with weary resignation. "You went in." I nodded, still shaking. "There's something down there, something old." Harris stared at the jungle beyond the huts, his voice flat. "Now it knows you." Dusk came early on the island, as though the sun couldn't bear to linger. By late afternoon, the jungle was already steeped in shadow, and the compound felt smaller, more fragile, like a raft adrift on endless black water. I was outside checking the generator when the first sound came. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, crunching in the gravel near the huts. "Mallory," I called. No answer. I gripped my rifle and scanned the compound. Mallory was perched on the watchtower, staring toward the tree line, knuckles white around his weapon. He wasn't moving, he wasn't even breathing. Then I heard it again, closer this time. I turned toward the jungle. Between the trunks, where the dying light bled into darkness, something shifted. At first, it looked like a man stepping into view. Tall, thin, arms swaying loosely at its sides. But the proportions were wrong. Its limbs were too long, its gait too smooth, like joints bending in places they shouldn't. The fire pit crackled, drawing light across its face, or what I thought was a face. For a fleeting second, I saw Lewis, his jaw slack, eyes wide, skin as pale as the moon. "Lewis," I whispered. The figure tilted its head, impossibly far, the neck bending like wet rope. Then its features melted, collapsing into shadow before reforming into someone else. Ramirez gasped behind me. "Madre de Dios." It stepped forward. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of rot and seawater. My throat tightened, bile rising. Every instinct screamed at me to fire, to run, to do anything but stand frozen as the thing crossed into the open. Mallory broke first. He unleashed a burst from the tower, bullets tearing through the dark. The thing staggered, shuddered, but it didn't fall. Its body rippled, absorbing the impacts as if the bullets passed through liquid flesh. The thing turned its head toward the gunfire. When it opened its mouth, no so, and came. Instead, the wind rose, carrying whispers across the compound, dozens of voices layered together. Lewis, other soldiers, children, women, all speaking at once, pleading and mocking in equal measure. Ramirez fell to his knees, covering his ears. Harris shouted orders, but his voice was drowned in the chorus. My heart hammered so violently I thought my chest might burst. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, the thing retreated. It stepped backward into the tree line, melting into the shadows until only the jungle remained. The whispers faded with it, leaving behind only the ragged gasps of terrified men. For a long time, no one moved. Mallory finally climbed down from the tower, face ashen. "What the hell was that?" Harris didn't answer. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, shoulders sagging beneath the weight of something he wasn't ready to share. I swallowed hard. It looked like Lewis. Harris's eyes flicked toward me, sharp and pained. That wasn't Lewis. It wears what it eats. Remember that. The fire guttered low, shadows pressing closer around the compound. I couldn't shake the memory of that shifting face, those impossible proportions. For the first time since arriving, I knew without question, this island wasn't cursed. It was haunted by something far worse. Sleep became impossible after that night. Every creak of wood, every sigh of wind across the corrugated roofs made me flinch. I stayed awake until dawn, rifle across my lap, watching shadows crawl across the walls. When morning came, Mallory dragged me toward the storage hut. "You need to see this," he muttered, eyes wide and bloodshot. Inside, he pointed to a loose panel behind the supply shelves. Someone had pried it open long ago, carving out a hiding place. From it, Mallory pulled a weathered leather-bound book. Its cover was stained, edges crumbling, pages yellowed by age and salt air. A journal. I flipped it open. The handwriting was cramped, spidery, written in English but dated back to the 1940s. A faded stamp on the inside cover revealed its origin. U.S. Navy, 1943. The first entries were ordinary. Logistics, supply shortages, weather complaints. But the tone shifted as the days passed. Words grew erratic, ink darker, blotched by trembling hands. August 3rd. Men hear voices at night. Thought it was natives, but there are no villages here. Must be tricks of wind. Still, it unsettles the crew. August 7th. Private Collins missing. Found his boot near the lagoon, torn clean through. No blood. How can there be no blood? August 10th. We found him. Or something that wore his skin. God forgive us. We burned it. But it didn't die. It only screamed with every voice we knew. I looked up, throat dry. Mallory whispered, "Keep going." I turned another page, hands trembling. August 15th. The caves are older than we imagined. Carvings deeper than our lights can reach. They move when you don't look, shift like tides. We should not have come here. The island doesn't want us. August 19th. They told us to dig. We obeyed. We found the stone. We bled on it. Now it follows us everywhere. The last entry was scrawled so violently the paper tore. August 23rd, we are not all tall. 1. We were never alone. It wears our faces. It waits for the dark. The remaining pages were blank. Mallory stared at me, voice shaking. They knew. They fought it. And they lost. Harris appeared in the doorway. His expression hardened the instant he saw the journal. Put it back. I bristled. You knew about this? His silence was answer enough. His eyes carried the weight of someone who had read every page long ago and chosen not to share. Ramirez entered behind him, crossing himself as he caught sight of the book. The stone, he murmured. The slab in the cave, it's the same. A cold knot formed in my gut. The journal wasn't just a record. It was a warning, the same pattern, the same cycle, repeating decades later. Soldiers brought here, lured into the caves, undone by the thing beneath the island. I closed the book, forcing my voice steady. If we don't break this cycle, we're next. Harris's face was grim. You don't break it. You endure it. But I wasn't convinced. Enduring wasn't survival. Enduring was just waiting to be devoured. And if the journal was right, time was running out. The journal haunted me all day. Every line felt like a thread pulling us towards something inevitable, and I couldn't shake the sense that the island itself wanted us to follow it. By mid-afternoon, Ramirez returned from patrol with news that froze my blood. Fresh digging, he said. South Ridge, not ours. We followed him out, boots crunching over brittle leaves, sweat slicking our backs. The air grew heavier as we approached the ridge, the humidity pressing against our lungs. When we reached the site, I understood why Ramirez's face had gone pale. The ground had been torn open, not by shovels or machines, but by something stronger. Great gashes in the soil formed a crude pit, the earth piled high on either side. At the bottom lay a slab of stone, half buried, identical to the altar we had seen in the caves. Symbols writhed across its surface, shifting as the sunlight touched them. Mallory swore under his breath. This wasn't here yesterday. He was right. The ground showed no sign of recent collapse. It was as if the earth itself had moved overnight, vomiting up what it had buried. I knelt at the edge, pulse pounding. The symbols glimmered faintly, as though damp with some internal light. I reached down without thinking, fingertips brushing the stone. Heat surged through me. Images flashed across my mind, faces stretched in agony, jaws open in endless screams, eyes black and hollow. A great shape stirred in the dark, vast and patient, waiting beneath the surface. I stumbled back, gasping. My skin burned where I had touched the slab, a faint mark seared into my palm. Harris caught my wrist, glaring. Never touch it. Do you hear me? That's how it starts. But I had already felt the truth. The slab wasn't just a marker, it was a door. Ramirez dropped to his knees, muttering prayers. Mallory paced, rifle clutched tight. I stared at the pit, unable to look away. The journal's words echoed in my skull. They told us to dig. We obeyed. We found the stone. We bled on it. I noticed then that the soil around the slab was darker, wet. I crouched again and pressed my hand against the dirt. It was warm, sticky. I lifted my fingers and saw the truth. Not soil, blood. The ground itself bled where the slab was uncovered. We retreated, shaken, but the air seemed to cling to us, thick with the metallic tang of iron. By the time we reached the compound, the smell was still in my nose, in my throat. That night, the dreams returned. I saw myself standing at the pit, staring down at the stone. Hands, not mine, guided a knife across my palm, pressing it to the slab. The symbols lit like fire, and something vast and hungry stirred beneath. I woke to find blood smeared across my cot. My palm was uncut, but the mark from the slab burned faintly, glowing in the dark. Ramirez stared at me from his bunk, eyes wide with terror. "It's chosen you." I couldn't answer. The truth was already sinking in, heavy as the island itself. The stone was awake now, and it wanted more. The sky cracked open 3 days after the slab rose from the earth. We had seen storms before, short bursts of rain, thunder that rolled harmlessly across the horizon. But this was different. The clouds boiled black and green, tumbling over one another like waves. The air carried the sharp sting of ozone, and the sea roared as if trying to claw its way onto land. By noon, the compound was drenched. Rain pelted the tin roofs in sheets, drowning our voices, hammering against the windows until it seemed the huts would collapse under the weight. Lightning split the sky, white and jagged, followed by thunder so loud it rattled our bones. Yet it wasn't the storm itself that unnerved me. It was what I saw between the flashes of lightning. Shapes in the tree line, tall, thin, swaying with the wind but not bending like trees should. Their heads tilted, always watching the compound, faces shifting each time the light illuminated them. For one flash, I saw Lewis again. The next, I saw my own reflection staring back at me from the dark. Ramirez sat in the corner of the mess hut, clutching his rosary so tight the beads cut into his fingers. Mallory paced, muttering, glancing at the windows every time thunder struck. Harris stood rigid, staring at the rain, jaw tight with secrets he refused to share. The storm raged into night, and still the shapes lingered. Their whispers wormed their way into the compound, faint beneath the roar of rain. Come out, come out. The stone calls. Around midnight, the generator died. The lights flickered out, plunging us into choking darkness. Mallory cursed, fumbling with his flashlight, but when the beam swept across the room, I almost wished it hadn't. The walls bore new scratches, deep grooves carved into the wood, still wet as if made seconds before. Water seeped through them, blacker than the storm outside. Then came the pounding. Not thun. Dare, fists or claws, hammering against the walls, slow, deliberate, shaking the structure with every strike. "Hold your fire!" Harris barked, though his own voice wavered. "It wants us to waste our bullets." But the pounding didn't stop. It circled the hut, methodical, testing every wall. My heart slammed against my ribs as I tracked it, waiting for the moment it would break through. And then, silence. The storm still screamed outside, but whatever hunted us had withdrawn. For now. I dared a glance through the rain-smeared window. The figures were closer, standing in the open yard now, rain streaming down their impossible limbs. One of them raised its head, and through the downpour I saw the face it wore. My own. I stumbled back, bile burning my throat. Mallory saw it too. His scream cut through the thunder. Ramirez muttered faster, clutching his cross until blood dripped from his palms. Harris's voice was low, bitter. The slab woke it. The storm is only the beginning. Lightning split the sky again, illuminating the yard in stark white light. For that instant, every figure turned toward me in unison, and they smiled. The storm had not broken by dawn. The compound was a drowned ruin of mud and scattered debris, the air thick with the smell of wet rot. Sleep was impossible, and none of us had eaten. We sat in the mess hut like prisoners waiting for execution. Mallory finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "They're not leaving." I saw them again at first light, standing at the fence, just staring. Ramirez wouldn't look up from his rosary. "Demonios," he whispered. "The island is theirs. We trespass." Harris said nothing. His silence was louder than words, and it gnawed at me. He knew more. He'd always known. By mid-morning, the storm shifted, rain thinning into a heavy drizzle. That was when the glass began to fog. The windows of the hut misted over from the outside, though the air inside was warm and still. Words appeared in the condensation. Letters written by an unseen hand. "Help me." Ramirez dropped his rosary. Mallory cursed under his breath. My stomach twisted into knots as I moved closer, watching the letters form one by one. Lewis's voice echoed in my memory. "It's inside. Help me." I raised a trembling hand toward the glass. That's when the figure pressed against it. Its face slammed against the pane, skin pale and rubbery, lips mouthing words I couldn't hear. The eyes were mine, my own reflection, staring back at me with a twisted grin. I stumbled backward, heart hammering. The glass bulged inward as the thing outside leaned harder, as though the barrier between us was no more than wet paper. "Don't touch it!" Harris barked, pulling me away. His voice cracked with panic for the first time. "It wants you to let it in." The window shuddered, cracks spiderwebbed across the glass, the sound sharp as gunfire. Mallory raised his rifle. "I'll end this right now." "No!" Harris shoved the barrel aside. "You can't kill what wears you. The bullet just makes it stronger." Before. Yeah, I could ask what he meant. The glass shattered inward. The figure poured through, not breaking but flowing, its body bending like liquid shadow. The air filled with the stench of brine and rot. Its face shifted. Me, then Lewis, then Ramirez's mother, each mouth whispering pleas and curses in overlapping voices. We scattered. Ramirez screamed prayers. Mallory fired anyway, bullets ripping through the thing. Each hole closed instantly, the wound sealing like water disturbed by stones. It lashed out, a tendril of darkness striking the table, splitting it in half like kindling. "Out! Move!" Harris roared. We bolted into the yard, rain soaking us as the creature slithered through the broken window, dragging itself upright with grotesque elegance. The others in the tree line stirred, dozens of them, stepping forward in unison. Their faces glowed pale in the dim light, every one of them someone we recognized. Lewis, my mother, Mallory's dead brother, Ramirez's wife, all of them, waiting. The storm might have kept us trapped before. Now I understood the truth. The storm wasn't the cage, it was the curtain. And now the curtain had lifted. We ran for the only high ground we had, the watchtower. Its wooden frame swayed in the storm, but at least it gave us distance from the things rising out of the jungle. Mallory scrambled up first, rifle strapped across his back, boots slipping on the wet ladder. Ramirez shoved me upward, muttering frantic prayers in Spanish, while Harris brought up the rear, shotgun clenched tight. Rain poured down in torrents, turning every rung slick as ice. By the time we reached the platform, the compound below was crawling with shadows. They weren't running. They didn't need to. They advanced slowly, deliberately, as though savoring every step. From up here, I could see their faces more clearly. Each one wore a mask I recognized. Friends, family, soldiers long dead. Some faces I didn't know at all. Strangers with empty eyes and broken jaws. They tilted their heads in unison, watching, waiting. Mallory raised his rifle. "We have the height. We can hold them off." "No," Harris said sharply. His voice was low, urgent, almost pleading. "You don't understand. You can't fight them head on. You'll only—" Gunfire cut him off. Mallory squeezed the trigger, spraying bullets into the crowd below. Several figures collapsed, bodies jerking violently, black ichor splattering into the mud. For a heartbeat, I dared to believe it might work. Then the fallen began to move. Their limbs twitched, twisted, reformed. One figure split into two, both dragging themselves upright on two long arms. The holes where the bullets had torn through them didn't heal. They multiplied. Harris grabbed Mallory's collar, shaking him. "Do you see now? Every wound makes more of them." Mallory stared down, face pale as the lightning-lit sky. The shadows below had doubled, maybe tripled, and still they came. Their whispers rose with the storm, weaving together into a single phrase. "The stone is awake." Ramirez Clu picked his cross, rocking back and forth. "Santa Maria, Madre de Dios." The first figure reached the base of the tower. Its hands weren't hands anymore. Long skeletal talons that raked across the wood, leaving deep gouges. Another followed, then another. The tower shook as they began to climb. I raised my rifle despite Harris's warning. My finger hovered over the trigger, trembling. If shooting only made more of them, then what the hell could we do? "They want you," Harris said suddenly, staring at me. His eyes burned with something like desperation. "It marked you when you touched the stone. That's why it's growing stronger. You're the key." My mouth went dry. What the hell does that mean? But before he could answer, the tower lurched violently. The creatures were halfway up, dragging themselves hand over hand, wood splintering beneath their weight. Mallory swung the butt of his rifle down, smashing one across the skull. The head caved in like wet clay, but two more hands took its place. We were running out of time. Lightning split the sky again, illuminating the pit on the south ridge in the distance. The slab glowed faintly, symbols burning brighter with every whisper from the horde below. The realization hit me like the thunder that followed. We weren't meant to fight them here. The tower, the compound, none of it mattered. The real battle was at the stone, The tower wouldn't hold. Every shuddering groan of its beams reminded us that we were seconds away from collapse. The creatures climbed higher, their hands sinking into the wood like it was soft clay. Their whispers pressed into my skull until I could hardly hear my own thoughts. The stone is awake. Feed it. Feed it. Harris leaned close, shouting above the storm. The pit! It wants you at the pit. That's the only place we stand a chance. What kind of chance? Mallory snapped, eyes wild. The kind that keeps us breathing another hour, Harris growled. The tower bucked violently, and that decided it for us. We scrambled down the ladder, boots slipping in the rain. One of the things lunged as I hit the ground, its face my own, grinning with jagged teeth. I swung my rifle like a club, feeling bone, or something like it, crack beneath the blow. The creature crumpled, but two more emerged from the mud beside it. We ran. The compound vanished behind us, swallowed by shadows. The jungle path to the south ridge was half flooded, vines slick beneath our boots. Every tree seemed to shift in the corner of my vision, shapes peeling away to follow us. Mallory fired blindly into the foliage, cursing with every step. Ramirez stumbled, nearly falling into the muck, but I hauled him up and pushed him forward. The whispers grew louder the closer we drew. The jungle itself seemed to breathe, its branches bending inward, funneling us toward the pit. When we broke through the trees, the storm seemed to pause. The slab glowed brighter now, symbols alive with fire. The ground around it pulsed faintly, as though the earth itself had veins carrying dark blood. I staggered to the edge of the pit, chest heaving. The mark on my palm burned like a brand. The slab called to it, tugging me forward with invisible strings. Mallory grabbed my arm. Don't even think about it. Whatever that Hing wants, you can't give it. But Harris shook his head. Rain plastered his hair to his face, his eyes glinting with something between fear and conviction. He doesn't have a choice. It marked him. That's why the horde grows stronger. He's the tether. If he resists, they'll drown the island in bodies. Ramirez gasped, voice shaking. Then what? He dies, or we all do? Harris's silence was answer enough. The slab pulsed, light intensifying. The whispers became screams. I felt something inside me unravel, threads pulling loose as though the stone was unmaking me cell by cell. My knees buckled and I fell toward the pit. Mallory and Ramirez caught me, holding me back from the edge. My vision blurred. Faces swam before me in the stormlight. Lewis, my mother, strangers I'd never seen, all of them mouthing the same words. Blood opens, flesh feeds. The slab cracked, just slightly, a fissure glowing red as molten rock. A sound rose from beneath the earth, deep and hungry, like the groan of something ancient waking from slumber. And I knew then with cold certainty, this wasn't just a curse or a haunting. It was a door, and we had just turned the key. The fissure widened with a sound like bones splitting. Steam rose from the crack in the slab, carrying a stench that turned my stomach. Rot, brine, and something older, like stone dust soaked in blood. We staggered back as the ground trembled. The jungle bent away from the pit, trees groaning as if afraid. Even the rain seemed to falter, drops hanging heavy in the air. I clutched my burning palm. The mark glowed faintly, threads of light pulling toward the fissure. It wanted me. No closer, Mallory barked, hauling me backward. His voice cracked under the weight of his own terror. This is suicide. But Harris didn't move. He stood at the pit's edge, shotgun forgotten at his side, eyes fixed on the glowing symbols. This is it, he whispered. The heart of it. This is why the Navy never left, why they buried the truth. Ramirez crossed himself, mumbling prayers. We should leave, Dios mío. We should burn it, sink it. The slab answered him with a voice not made for human ears. A low vibration rolled up from beneath, rattling our teeth, shaking marrow and bone. The fissure split further, revealing darkness deeper than sight, a void that breathed. And then came the movement. Not a hand, not a limb, something greater. A mass of black flesh shifted beneath the slab, pressing upward against the crack. It wasn't climbing, it was rising, as if the stone was merely a thin skin stretched over its prison. The mark on my hand seared. My knees buckled. Images flooded my skull. Armies kneeling before the slab, feeding its sacrifices. Generations of men dragged screaming into the pit. A lineage of obedience written in blood. I realized, with ice in my veins, that this island wasn't chosen by chance. We were part of the cycle. The slab always called soldiers. It's awake, Harris said, voice hollow. And it won't go back to sleep until it's fed. The fissure belched a gust of Heat. For a heartbeat, I saw eyes, countless eyes, layered one atop the other, blinking from the depths. Then they vanished, replaced by a swirl of shifting faces, mouths gnashing, each whispering with perfect clarity. "Join us!" Mallory yanked me away from the edge. "We have to leave. Screw this mission, screw Harris's secrets, screw all of it. We run now or we're next." But my legs locked. The pull from the slab was irresistible. Every heartbeat dragged me closer, like I was hooked from within. Ramirez grabbed my shoulders, shaking me hard. His rosary swung wildly in the stormlight. "You fight it, hermano! You fight!" Harris stepped forward instead. His voice broke with something close to reverence. "It doesn't want you dead, soldier. It wants you open. You're the vessel." Before I could process his words, the fissure split wide. A blast of heat and wind erupted, hurling us backward. The ground cracked like brittle glass, soil bleeding in rivulets. The void beneath wasn't empty anymore. Shapes moved within, limbs that weren't limbs, jaws that weren't mouths, crawling over one another in hunger. The island itself groaned, and I finally understood. This wasn't just a door. It was a womb, and something was being born. The ground convulsed like a living thing. Roots tore free, rocks split apart, and the pit yawned wider, vomiting steam and black blood into the storm. The fissure no longer whispered. It screamed. I clutched my ears, but the sound wasn't in the air. It was inside my skull. Every nerve burned as if my bones themselves were singing. Ramirez collapsed, muttering fragments of scripture. Mallory fired a desperate volley into the pit, bullets vanishing into the void without sound or impact. And then it came. The slab cracked clean down the center, halves sliding apart. From the opening rose a mass of shadow and flesh, heaving upward like a drowned corpse breaking the surface. Its body was shapeless, constantly folding and unfolding into new forms, arms becoming wings, faces melting into blank flesh, mouths opening where no mouths should be. The smell of it hit next, rancid and oceanic, as if every dead thing from the sea floor had been dredged up at once. I gagged, bile burning my throat. The mark on my palm blazed, my vision blurred with light and memory. I saw soldiers kneeling at this very pit decades earlier, cutting themselves, offering blood. I saw them vanish into the void, swallowed without a sound, and behind it all, I felt the presence, the will, of the thing rising now. It wasn't just a monster. It was a hunger-given form. The storm bowed to it. The lightning no longer split the sky at random. It crowned the thing in constant flashes, illuminating its grotesque rebirth. Every time the light struck, its shape changed. In one flash, it looked like Lewis. In the next, my mother. In the next, myself. Mallory screamed at me over the roar. "Tell me you've got a plan!" I had nothing. My thoughts were ash. The pull from the slab dragged me to my knees, forcing my body forward. It wanted me closer. It wanted me to offer. Harris didn't stop me this time. Instead, he stepped to the edge of the pit, arms wide, eyes fever bright. "It's not here to destroy us. It's here to remake us. Don't you see? We're chosen." He dropped his shotgun and reached toward the rising mass. The thing answered. A tendril of black flesh lashed upward, wrapping Harris in its grip. His scream was raw, unending, as the tendril drew him down toward the fissure. His skin bubbled, stretched, split. Faces bloomed across his chest, each one shrieking in his voice. Mallory grabbed my arm. "We run, right now." But running meant nothing. The island itself was splitting beneath us, roots snapping, earth sliding into the pit. Ramirez staggered to his feet, tears cutting clean lines down his mud-smeared face. He held his rosary high, chanting louder, defying the storm. The thing didn't hesitate. Another tendril shot upward, wrapping around him. Ramirez vanished in a heartbeat, pulled screaming into the void. And then there were two, Mallory and me. The entity rose higher still, blotting out the sky. Its shifting face turned toward me, thousands of mouths speaking as one. Blood opens, flesh feeds, vessel accepts. The mark on my palm split open, blood welling in the rain. My body locked, my knees bent, and against my will I took a step toward the pit. The pit roared like a furnace, heat rolling over us in choking waves. Mallory gripped my shoulder, trying to haul me back, but the pull was stronger than him, stronger than both of us combined. My legs moved without command. each step dragging me closer to the edge. The mark on my palm split wider, blood streaming into the rain-slick earth. It hissed as it touched the ground, vanishing into the fissure as though the slab itself drank it. "Fight it!" Mallory shouted, his voice raw. "You don't have to give it what it wants." But I couldn't fight. The hunger wasn't just outside me, it was inside now, burrowed deep, tugging at the marrow of my bones. My vision wavered, the world narrowed until all I saw was the pit and the thing that rose from it. The entity had grown colossal, its body towering over the ridge. It was less a form than a storm given flesh. Faces crawled across it like fish beneath ice, some screaming, some smiling, and every single one turned to me. The voices overlapped into a deafening chant. Vessel accepts, vessel feeds, vessel opens. I fell to my knees at the edge. The ground was warm, almost pulsing, like the skin of some vast animal. My blood ran freely into it. The pit answered with another tremor, splitting wider, revealing deeper darkness beneath. Mallory dropped beside me, seizing my arm. His eyes burned with desperation. "Listen to me, soldier. You are not a vessel, you're a man. They want you to believe you're nothing more than a key. Don't let them—" A tendril shot upward, whipping across the ridge. It caught Mallory by the leg, dragging him toward the pit. He roared, slamming the butt of his rifle against it, splintering bone-like flesh. For a moment it released him, but two more tendrils rose instantly, writhing like snakes in the storm. I tried to move, to help him, but my body was no longer mine. My hand hovered over the fissure, blow, ood pouring faster, every drop greeted by the creature's exultant moans. The mark burned like fire, veins of light spreading up my arm. Mallory's scream ripped through the chaos as a tendril wrapped around his chest, lifting him into the air. "Don't you give in!" he shouted at me, even as the thing pulled him toward the abyss. "If you do, it takes everything." The entity's faces shifted, merging into one. My own face stared back at me, grinning with infinite mouths. "You are chosen. You are Door." My mind cracked. I saw worlds drowning, cities burning, entire seas drained dry, all offered into the pit by vessels before me. The cycle had turned for centuries. Now it was my turn. Mallory's voice tore through the vision. "Fight!" With the last shred of strength I had, I wrenched my bleeding hand away from the fissure. Agony seared through me like tearing a hook from flesh. The creature shrieked, the sound splitting the storm in two. Its tendrils thrashed violently, tossing Mallory against the ground but not yet consuming him. The fissure pulsed angrily, demanding more blood, and I realized I hadn't stopped the ritual. I'd only delayed it. The creature's scream tore through the jungle, a sound so violent the trees themselves split and toppled. The fissure pulsed like a beating heart, every throb shaking the ridge beneath us. My blood still stained the stone, and it wanted more. Mallory groaned beside me, coughing mud from his mouth. He tried to rise but collapsed again, his ribs clearly broken from the impact. "We can't hold it," he rasped. "This thing won't stop." He was right. The air vibrated with its fury, pressure building until my skull felt like it would crack. Tendrils lashed outward in every direction, flattening trees, carving trenches in the soil. The jungle burned where they struck, flames rising from rain-soaked wood. Then the voices began again, no longer a chant, but a shriek of accusation. Vessel resists. Vessel breaks. Vessel feeds. My body bent forward against my will. The mark on my palm burned hotter, skin splitting to the wrist. Lines of glowing light crawled up my arm, threading into my chest. My heart faltered, skipping beats, struggling against something trying to claim it. Mallory dragged himself closer, blood on his lips. His eyes locked on mine with savage determination. "Don't let it win, soldier. I don't care if I die here, but you don't give it what it wants." But the entity had heard him. A tendril whipped upward, seizing him by the waist. His scream split the air as it lifted him high, twisting him like a rag doll. I lunged forward, but the ground split beneath me, opening new fissures that blocked my path. The tendril squeezed, bones cracked like twigs. Mallory's body convulsed, mouth opening in one final roar of defiance, before it bent backward with a wet snap. His scream cut short. The entity did not consume him. Instead, it tore him in half, holding both pieces aloft like trophies. His blood rained into the pit, and the fissure glowed brighter, symbols blazing, like firebrands. I collapsed to my knees. Mallory was gone. Ramirez was gone. Harris had chosen his fate. I was the last. The entity turned its storm-crowned mass toward me, tendrils retracting, focusing. My face rippled across its surface again, thousands of me grinning in mockery. You break, you open, you are door. My body convulsed, muscles locking as the light spread deeper, my veins lit like molten metal, pain so sharp it blurred vision and thought. The fissure opened wider still, earth groaning as if birthing something vast. And in that agony, I realized something. The ritual was incomplete. It couldn't open fully without my surrender. That was why it hadn't devoured Mallory, why it hadn't ended me outright. It didn't want my death. It wanted my will. If I broke, the door would open. If I resisted, maybe, just maybe, it would starve. The entity screamed again, and the fissure widened to its breaking point. Shadows poured upward like smoke, reaching for me, clawing with faces of everyone I'd ever known. I clenched my ruined hand into a fist, blood streaming freely, my body shook, vision blackening. "I am not your door," I whispered. The island answered with a crack like thunder. And then everything fell apart. The ridge split open beneath me, stone cracked like glass underfoot, whole slabs of earth shearing away into the pit. The ground's convulsions rattled my bones, throwing me to my stomach. I clawed at the mud, nails splitting as the world heaved and buckled. The entity towered above, a living storm of shadow and flesh. Its tendrils writhed skyward, slapping lightning from the clouds, pulling bolts down into its own mass. The jungle burned in sheets of green fire, the rain hissing as it struck. Vessel resists. Vessel defies. Vessel must break. The words screamed through the fissures, rattling the island itself. The mark on my palm seared with such intensity I thought my arm might split apart entirely. Blood poured freely, steaming as it hit the ground. I pressed the wound against the mud, trying to smother it, but the earth only drank it faster. A roar bellowed from the pit, no single voice but thousands, overlapping. The fissure expanded wider still, edges crumbling away into blackness. I watched in horror as whole chunks of jungle slid into the void, trees toppling like children's toys. The island was collapsing. I staggered to my feet, stumbling backward from the widening edge. My body felt hollow, every step weaker than the last. The pull from the pit was relentless, dragging me forward even as instinct screamed to run. Behind me, the ocean surged. Waves taller than cliffs hammered the shore, water tearing across the jungle in frothing walls. The sea itself seemed pulled toward the fissure, sucked down into the hungry dark. The entity howled in triumph, its countless faces writhing across its surface, all turned to me. Each mouth grinned, lips slick with fire. "You cannot run. You cannot hide. You are the key. Open. Open. Open." I dropped to my knees, chest heaving. The mud around me bubbled, searing hot. My skin blistered where it touched the ground. The fistes, sure, throbbed like a wound ready to burst. For a moment, I thought of Mallory's last words. His body broken, his defiance intact. He hadn't begged, he hadn't yielded. He'd spat in the face of this horror even as it crushed him. Could I do the same? The island gave another shudder, throwing me onto my back. Above, the storm fractured, clouds spiraling inward, forming a black eye over the pit. The entity reached upward, tendrils stretching into the vortex as if it meant to pierce the heavens. And then, suddenly, silence. The storm froze mid-roar. The fissure pulsed once, twice, and then stopped. The light from the slab dimmed. The pull on my chest faltered. For the briefest instant, I felt something inside the entity hesitate. It needed me, more than I had realized. Without my surrender, it couldn't complete the ritual. I laughed then, a broken sound ripped from a raw throat. "You can't do it without me, can you?" The entity shuddered. Its countless mouths opened in unison, shrieking with rage. Tendrils slammed down all around me, crushing earth and stone, tearing trees from their roots. The island cracked again, fissures spider-webbing outward, and I realized if it couldn't have me, it would take the island instead. The collapse had begun. The island was tearing itself apart. The ground beneath me split open in jagged lines, vomiting fire and steam. Chunks of jungle slid into the abyss, trees flailing like drowning men before vanishing into black water. The ocean itself poured inward, dragged screaming into the pit, its waves taller than towers. And still, the entity rose. It no longer had shape. Its mass was a storm of mouths and eyes, tendrils stretching into the sky like the roots of some inverted tree. Every lightning bolt crowned it. Every thunderclap was its voice. Vessel resists. Vessel fails. Vessel must open. The mark on my hand burned until it split to the bone. Light streamed from the wound, tendrils of fire threading up my arm into my chest. My heartbeat faltered, thudding heavy and irregular. It was inside me now, clawing its way toward the core of who I was. I crawled to the edge of the fissure, peering down into the pit. There was no bottom anymore, only endless blackness alive with shifting faces, countless generations of the Taken. They reached upward, eyes wide, mouths moving. Some were pleading, others were laughing. And I understood. They weren't prisoners. They were part of it. Every vessel who had given in, every soldier who had opened, had been absorbed. If I surrendered, I would join them. If I resisted, I would die. But the cycle might break. Mallory's broken voice echoed in my memory. Don't give it what it wants. I clenched my ruined fist, forcing the words past a throat full of blood. I am not your door. The entity shrieked, tendrils slamming down in fury, flattening the ridge around me. One coiled around my leg, yanking me toward the pit. I clawed at the earth, nails splitting, but it dragged me closer, closer, until the abyss opened beneath. Heat blistered my face. The stench of rot and brine filled my lungs. I dangled over the fissure, staring into the void that wanted to swallow the world. You are chosen. You are key. You are ours. No, I whispered, tears burning hot against my mud-streaked skin. I am the lock. With the last of my strength, I raised my bleeding hand and drove it into the fissure's edge. Bone split, blood poured freely, soaking the slab. But this time, I wasn't giving it to the entity. I was sealing it. The slab screamed, light erupted, blinding, spearing upward through storm and cloud. The tendril around my leg convulsed, snapping away. The entity recoiled, its storm body writhing in agony as the fissure snapped shut, stone grinding against stone. The island convulsed one final time. The pit collapsed inward, dragging jungle, fire, and ocean into its maw. The entity's voices shrieked in fury, then silence swallowed them whole. I was thrown clear, slammed against broken earth as the world folded into itself. And then, quiet. When I opened my eyes, the storm was gone. The fissure was sealed, the slab whole once more. The jungle was scorched, the compound destroyed, the island a ruin. I was alone. The mark on my palm was blackened, a scar burned deep into flesh. The pain was gone, but I knew the truth. I hadn't destroyed it, I had only locked it away again. And one day, the door would open,